Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. We have a really fun technique, as usual, that we are going to explore with some paper scrunching. But first up, I don't have the stamps that I need to make this project work, so we are going to make our own. Now this one here is about 3mm thick fun foam. If you don't have that and you only have really thin fun foam like these two, I'm just going to cut it out twice and pop it together, and that will make us a thicker fun foam for creating our own homemade stamps. Now one of these is going to be used with this Hugs die from Waffle flour. This is the oversized Hugs sentiment, something like that. You know the deal. I'll have it linked down below in case you would like to check them out. But all you do is put it on top of your foam and then roll it through your die cutting machine like you would just with regular paper, but make sure that you only roll it through once. Don't be tempted to go back through because the foam stretches as it goes through and you're going to get a double cut if you run it back through the other way. So just do it once. It will cut perfectly and you can pop out all those little bits. Everything pops out really well. Now this time I'm going to do it with a circle die, but this is the really thin fun foam that I'm using. So I am going to die cut each one once. They are the same size. And then with these ones, you can see that if I pop them together, it'll be the perfect size for a stamp. I just find that if you use really thin foam tape for doing this stamping technique, I'm more likely to make mistakes or get ink from the edges where I don't want it to kind of stamp, if you know what I mean. So the 2mm is kind of as thin as I would go. The 3mm is what I prefer if I have any or I can find any around the house. Now, this is what I'm going to do. When I put these in my stamping platforms or on acrylic blocks, I just use double-sided tape, and I find it peels off perfectly well afterwards. So I've put the two circles together, then I've put them onto my stamping platform, then I have my card base in my stamping platform. I am using some Catherine Paula inks today, and this one is going to be a light blue color. Now, have a fun play with all of your colors, with layering these colors up, because this is really fun. Now the very first time I use the foam, I make sure I get a good amount of ink, and then I'm just going to press down just like I would a normal stamp. This is a very large solid stamp though. Even if this were like photopolymer or red rubber, this is a large stamp. So I don't mind that it's not perfect at all. Then I'm going to come in, I think this is maybe Suede shoes, the darker blue. I just have a handful of the Catherine Paula minis and I do really love her inks. Now I'm going to completely cover this in the darker blue, but wait, because here is the fun bit. Take a piece of copy paper, scrunch it up sort of lightly, then dab away at the ink. So don't swipe, just dab up and down, dab up and down. You can either just keep going or you can do what I did and re-scrunch it in a different place. There's no rhyme or reason to this, just dab up and down so that the paper absorbs some of the ink. And this truly is a little bit trial and error, honestly, as to what results you are going to get. But you can experiment with that, so just dab up and down. Then once you think you are happy, close up your stamping platform and press down with the darker coloured ink there, and then look at this. Wait for it. Wow, how cool is that? So this is a really fun technique. And there is obviously lots of ways that we can apply this. Now, don't forget that you can absolutely clean off your fun foam. You can clean off any of it to reuse these stamps over and over again. I know lots of people pop these onto really like plastic discs or hard cardboard so that you can reuse them over and over again. Sometimes I do that. Often when I'm putting them in my stamping platform, I tend not to. And that's okay too, just whatever you are comfortable with. Now this is from the party collection, so I used those two blues there. This time I'm going to give it a go with a yellow and I wasn't sure, peachy or orange. We'll choose one or the other. Now these are beautiful inks. I always love Catherine Paula inks for stamping solid with a dye ink. In general, if I think I want to stamp really solid, I would use some VersaFine clear inks. but they are pigment, of course, and that has its own set of bits and pieces, whereas dye inks, often I find really hard to get a really solid stamping, especially because this stamp that we have created is huge. It's large. It's such a solid stamp. And so I used the Catherine Paula ones and was really happy with the results. Now, as we push the paper into to get the texture, then we may make some dents into this homemade stamp. So that's why I think you can see a little bit more white spots showing through, but I'm okay with that. That's okay. Now, this one here, I just have a little bit of corrugated cardboard because I actually want to show you that this technique, even though we use scrunched paper, I think that is just, the results are stunning. But remember, you can print anything into this. I mean, bubble wrap, you can print these like this corrugated cardboard, you can print other stamp images. So just try things out, see what you find, and you might be surprised with what gorgeous patterns that we can create. This reminds me a little bit of the results of doing gel printing using our jelly plate. This is what it kind of looks like. You can layer things up a lot. Obviously, we're just using one stamp to create this. But I am going to move the next one in on top of this just so I can get the placement right, because I wanted the circle exactly where it was. So that's why I just put one on top of the other, and that's okay because we've still got lots of great clearance. And then with this one, I'm going to come in with the yellow again. But I am going to come in with a different color. So in general, you do a lighter color underneath and you're going to do a darker color on top, like as your second layer. And I wanted to see what it would look like if I came in with the same dark blue that I used the first time, but on top of the yellow. Now I was expecting, I must admit, I was expecting some of it to turn green. Obviously blue and yellow are going to make green. And I really love the paper scrunching technique, so that's what I wanted to go with. But this surprised me a little bit. It didn't exactly come out as I wanted to, but I truly was just experimenting and having fun with colors. I tried some of these with my VersaFine clear inks and it worked beautifully as well. I tried it with my oxide inks. It came out using, I could see some of the corners from the ink pads in those ones, so I'm not sure exactly why. But my preference definitely was for the Catherine Paula and the VersaFine clears. They both worked beautifully. But as I said, this was such a large background stamp that I had to keep that in mind. Now, if you already have background stamps or like solid images or big solid stamps, then that's perfect. You don't have to do the homemade version at all. But this is just if you don't and you happen to have the dies that you can use, then go for gold. So I wanted to do sort of the same technique used in a couple of different ways on my card. So that's why I went with the words here, and I also wanted that background gorgeous circle. So I think this might be Tiara ink, I can't remember, but anyway, a couple of different layers of that ink here, and then I thought I would try a few different, I wasn't sure, I was really just experimenting. So this is the orange twist, and I'm going to put a little bit of this on, just get a little bit of coverage. Then I'm going to come in with the paper, a little scrunch piece of paper. I do find that if you don't get a new piece of paper that you can transfer some of the ink, so you do have to be a little bit careful, but then pop this down, and again, this looks stunning. How cool is that? A very cool layering technique. Now, I'm going to sort of do this over and over again. I wanted to have a pink background. I wanted to try it out with the oranges, the yellows, the reds, the pinks. I wasn't sure what I wanted to go with the blue, but because orange and blue are contrasting colors, I knew that this would really stand out. So I'm going to give myself a few different options, and whilst I'm at it, I may as well, because usually I will die cut out all of these sentiments and pop them in the packaging behind the die, so that if they come in handy the next time around, they are ready to go. Whereas if I put them in a scraps pile to be used, very rarely will I actually remember to look at the scraps pile when I'm thinking of a particular die. In my craft space, what I do is I put the spares in the back of the packaging. That way I am much more likely to see it. It's directly in front of my face when I come to use that particular die or that stamp or whatever it may be. Now to create our focal point that is going to go in front of all of these bits and pieces so we can put everything together, I have the Bold Blooms Erica stamp set here from Woodware. Again, I just love these stamps. This is definitely my style, and this gorgeous big one here is what I'm going to use today. I'm going to pop this on an acrylic block and use some VersaFine Onyx black ink, just my go-to ink when it comes to stamping in black. Then I'm going to stamp it down just on some regular cardstock because the colouring we are going to do is my kind of lazy style colouring. This is, we already have a really bold background, so we need to bear that in mind when we are creating a focal image. Things are quite busy and bold and there's a lot of colour going on, so I don't want everything sort of competing. So that's what I think about when I'm creating a piece. I don't want sort of bold on bold. I usually have either sort of a calmer focal point and then a bold background, or a bold focal point and then a little bit of a calmer background. So one or the other. I am going to add some embossing powder always because this ensures that I can't smudge anything. I don't have to wait for things to dry. So this is just what I prefer to do when I am going to colour in images. Pop it back into the bottle. This is the clear super fine embossing powder. Heat this until it is all nice and melted. Then to the nice quick easy version of colouring, I have these little colouring brushes here. I guess some of these have angled tips to them, some of them have flat tips. You can buy both of them. I prefer the flat tips, I think, but angled is going to work just as well. Now often when I use these, I would pretty much try and just use whatever is left on the brush. If I don't have to get the ink pad out, then that's great. I pretty much have one for each colour family. Sometimes I have one for darker and lighter, like a dark green and a light green. But in general, the oranges and the yellows pretty much go together. The pinks, then there's blues, purples. So I don't need too many brushes and to have kind of a pretty full set. And I really am just doing the lightest colouring ever here. I've got a bit of green left on my brush, so I'm going to make that work. Then I find a different green brush, a darker one, and I'll do a little bit of shading with that, but not too much at all. And that way I didn't even have to get out the green ink. Now, I'm going to do some fussy cutting as well. These are the Cutter Bee scissors. I recommend to find yourself a really good pair of fussy cutting scissors. This image here is probably my limit for fussy cutting. I'm not a big fan of fussy cutting really tricky images, and I choose pretty carefully, but I did like this flower and I felt like it was necessary, so I didn't mind cutting it at all, but this is probably my limit for what I choose to fussy cut. But a good pair, even on smooth, beautiful petals, a good pair of fussy cutting scissors is worth their weight in gold. Then I'm going to take a black marker pen. It doesn't matter what kind you have. This is a pretty cheap and cheerful one. As usual, I'll link them down below, the ones that I use. But this one is just going to quickly guide around the outline, and then this is what is going to make your fussy cutting look 10 times better than it actually is. So even with me, this covers up all of the white core. It covers up anywhere that you went a little bit off track or you went a little bit overboard and sort of cut in a little bit too far. It makes it all look nice and even. So this is definitely one of those steps. If you are fussy cutting, I would say that this is a good step to take. Now we are going to start by putting the card all together. Here are the sentiments that I ended up doing in the end. So I did 4. I'm going to take the outline, which comes with it. I am going to use a little bit of mint tape to hold it on as it goes through. I don't have a magnetic platform or anything like that, just my regular Big Shot. And then I'm going to run this through. As I said, I'm not going to waste these sentiments. I'd rather die cut them all whilst I have them now, because that means I will just pop them behind the die, and that way hopefully I will find a place that I can use them up. And if I can't, then I know that one of my children most definitely will. So pop it on the next one, and then whilst I've got everything out and going, I will do that. And then we are left with 4 gorgeous sentiments, our beautiful blue background, and then our nice delicate flower, which can go on there too. Now, I knew that the stalk was going to be too long, the stem, but I just left it nice and long so that I can trim it off to whatever length I needed, because I wasn't 100% sure of the layout at the moment. I'm going to take some of my most favourite foam tape. because I can cut this foam tape really, really skinny. I can leave it, there's 2 different widths that it comes in. I think it is 1/4 of an inch and maybe 1/2 of an inch. But if you want to, you can also cut this really, really thin. With my fussy cutting scissors, I can cut this width into 1/3. So I'm just going to bend this around some of the leaves, make sure it's all nice and covered, and pop this up just a little bit to give the card a little bit of dimension, and it really pops off that background. As I said, I'm wanting to create a little bit of distance between the focal point and the background because the background is so bold. Now, once I want to cover the sentiment, the back of the sentiment, I actually take off the release paper, and this way I can just curve that foam tape all the way around, and it means I don't have to cut lots of little bits and pieces. Any left over, I'll just pop it in the middle, or I pop it to the side. I literally just stick it to my craft space, and I have a wee space where I sort of look first when it comes to adhesive, and I'm able to use it next time I need some. So I'm going to cut the stem just where I need it to be. It's going to be well hidden behind the hugs. I wasn't sure if I wanted the pink or the orange, but the pink definitely looked better. And then I'm going to pop that down the bottom to cover kind of the least amount possible of that gorgeous background that we created. But you can still see all of that gorgeous texture. I think you can still see the gorgeous texture in the sentiment, and I really, really like it. I couldn't help myself but add a little bit of glossy accents to the center of the flower, and that will go on a little bit cloudy, but it will dry clear and dimensional. If you wanted to, for a little bit of extra, you could also sprinkle some glitter in it when it's wet. But that is my card for today. I hope you have enjoyed this video where I've showed you this little paper scrunching texture technique, and I appreciate it so much that you are here, that you comment, that you like. I love it all. I appreciate it so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, bye.